"Grandma, they went to take your inheritance." Sophie's whispered words hung in the dimly lit bedroom, her small face serious in the glow of the nightlight. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't move. "What did you say, sweetheart?" I finally managed, keeping my voice steady despite the sudden pounding of my heart. My 9-year-old granddaughter glanced nervously at the door, as if expecting her parents to materialize, despite the fact they were supposedly 500 miles away in Las Vegas. "I wasn't supposed to hear," she continued in that same hushed tone. "I was getting water last night, and they were in Daddy's office. Daddy said you're too old to handle so much money, and they found a special lawyer who could help them get control of everything." I smoothed Sophie's covers, buying myself precious seconds to compose my expression. At 68, I'd thought I was beyond being blindsided. Yet here I was, knocked sideways by a child's bedtime confession. "That sounds like grown-up business that you don't need to worry about," I said, forcing a reassuring smile. "I'm sure there's some misunderstanding." But even as the words left my mouth, puzzle pieces were clicking into place. Rebecca's sudden increase in visits, Philip's pointed questions about my estate planning, their insistence that I must be overwhelmed managing James's inheritance. 5 years after my husband's death, they'd apparently decided I'd had the money long enough. "Are you mad at them?" Sophie's voice pulled me back to the present, her eyes wide with worry. "No, sweetheart," I lied, tucking her favorite stuffed penguin closer to her side. "Grown-ups sometimes talk about complicated things that sound worse than they are. Nothing for you to worry about. Promise?" She yawned, her eyelids growing heavy. "I promise. Now it's late, and you have school tomorrow. Sweet dreams, my love." I kissed her forehead and quietly left the room, closing the door behind me. Only then did I allow my mask to slip, my hands trembling as I gripped the hallway banister. Rebecca was my only child, my connection to James, the reason I'd maintained my modest lifestyle despite the millions my husband had left me. I'd never denied her anything, paying for her lavish wedding, helping with the down payment on their oversized house, covering Sophie's private school tuition, writing checks for their constant emergencies without question. I'd done it all willingly, grateful for any attention they deigned to give me, pathetically thankful whenever they remembered to include me in holidays or family photos. I told myself it was normal, that adult children had busy lives, that I shouldn't expect too much. And now this. In the kitchen, I made tea I didn't want, my movements automatic as my mind raced. I wasn't a financial genius like James had been, but I wasn't senile either. I'd managed our household accounts for 40 years of marriage. I balanced my checkbook to the penny each month. I read the quarterly statements from the investment firm and asked appropriate questions during my annual review. Yet somehow, Rebecca and Philip had convinced themselves I was incompetent, that I needed to be managed like a child. The familiar chime of my phone interrupted my spiraling thoughts. A text from Rebecca. "Hope Sophie isn't giving you any trouble. Our meetings are going great. Philip says this could be life-changing." Life-changing indeed. I typed back a bland response about Sophie being an angel and asking when they'd return. "Sunday evening," came the reply. 4 more days. Setting my phone down, I moved to the living room window, staring out at the quiet suburban street. The same street where I'd raised Rebecca, where James and I had built our life together. The same house I'd stubbornly refused to leave after his death, despite Rebecca's repeated suggestions that I might be happier in a retirement community. Now I understood why. Returning to the kitchen, I opened the drawer where I kept household paperwork. Behind the neatly organized utility bills and warranty cards was a business card I hadn't looked at in years. Martin Abernathy, Eskens, James's attorney, and the executor of his will. I hesitated only briefly before reaching for my phone. It was nearly 10 p.m., far too late for a business call, but this wasn't business. This was personal. "Eleanor," Martin answered on the 3rd ring, surprise evident in his voice. "Is everything all right?" "I'm not sure," I replied, surprising myself with the steadiness of my tone. "But I think I need your help." As I explained what Sophie had overheard, Martin's silence on the other end grew heavier. When I finished, he let out a long breath. "Eleanor, if what you're telling me is accurate, this is very serious. We need to meet first thing tomorrow." "I can't leave Sophie," I explained. "Rebecca and Philip left her with me while they're in Las Vegas." "Las Vegas," he repeated flatly. "I see. Well, I can come to you then." 9 a.m.? That would be after Sophie leaves for school. Perfect. After hanging up, I sat at the kitchen table, my tea long cold, and tried to make sense of it all. The daughter I'd raised, the one I'd sacrificed for, the one I still wrote checks to without question, was actively working to take control of my assets, to have me declared incompetent. For the first time since James died, I felt something other than grief or loneliness stirring within me, something that felt suspiciously like rage. By the time I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, a plan was beginning to form in my mind. Rebecca and Philip had underestimated me, dismissed me as a doddering old woman, too confused to manage her own affairs. They thought I was easy prey. They had no idea what was coming. I paused at Sophie's door, cracking it open to check on her. She slept peacefully, innocent and unaware of the storm brewing around her. My sweet granddaughter, caught between greedy parents and a grandmother she'd tried to warn. In that moment, I made a promise, not just to protect my assets, but to protect Sophie. Whatever I did next would be with her future in mind. I slipped into my own room and opened my laptop, my fingers moving with purpose across the keyboard. By morning, I would have the framework for a plan that would leave Rebecca and Philip with far more than they'd bargained for when they returned from their business trip. They wanted to play games with my inheritance? Fine. Game on. Martin Abernathy arrived precisely at 9, his silver BMW pulling into my driveway moments after the school bus disappeared around the corner with Sophie aboard. I'd known Martin for over 40 years. He'd been James's friend before becoming our attorney, had handled our wills, our investments, and ultimately, James's estate after the cancer took him. I'd always found comfort in Martin's meticulous nature, his Brooks Brothers suits, and his old-school approach to client relationships. Today, that familiarity was a lifeline. "You look well, Eleanor," he said, as I ushered him into the living room. His eyes, however, scanned my face with professional assessment, no doubt looking for signs of the cognitive decline my daughter had apparently diagnosed. "I'm not senile, Martin," I said dryly, gesturing for him to take a seat. "At least not yet." The ghost of a smile crossed his lined face. "I never thought you were. James always said you were the sharp one in the relationship. He just had the fancy title and the corner office." I poured coffee from the carafe I'd prepared, taking a moment to collect my thoughts. "I need to know what Rebecca and Philip might be planning, legally speaking. Is it even possible for them to take control of my affairs without my consent?" Martin accepted the cup with a nod of thanks. "Unfortunately, yes. There are several approaches they might take. The most direct would be seeking guardianship or conservatorship, claiming you're no longer capable of managing your affairs." "On what grounds?" I demanded, indignation rising. "I'm perfectly competent." "You and I know that," he said gently. "But a determined petitioner with financial resources can find experts willing to testify otherwise, especially if they can point to any behaviors that seem unusual or concerning." I thought back over recent months. Had I given them any ammunition? Any forgetful moments or confused conversations they could weaponize? "They've been encouraging me to simplify my life," I recalled. "Rebecca keeps suggesting I sell the house, says it's too much for me to manage. And Philip offered to organize my financial records last month." Martin's expression darkened. "Creating a paper trail, making it seem like you've been asking for help, displaying uncertainty." "But I haven't," I protested. "I've never—" I stopped short, a memory surfacing. "Except, I did let Rebecca help me file my taxes this year. She said their accountant offered to do mine as a favor." "Who signed the return?" "I did, of course. Did you review it carefully first?" I hesitated, then admitted the truth. "No, I trusted her." Martin set his coffee down with deliberate care. "Eleanor, I need to see that return, and any other financial documents Rebecca or Philip have helped you with recently." For the next hour, we combed through my files. Martin's expression grew increasingly grave as we discovered discrepancies I'd never noticed. Investment accounts I didn't recognize listed on my tax return, signatures on documents that resembled mine but weren't quite right, statements addressed to me that I'd never seen. "They've been laying groundwork," Martin finally said, organizing the suspicious documents into a separate pile, creating a paper trail of financial confusion, possibly even fabricating evidence of poor decision-making. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my coffee. "How long do you think they've been planning this? Based on these documents? At least 8 months?" He met my eyes directly. "Eleanor, I have to ask, Have you updated your will since James died? No, I admitted. I meant to, but Rebecca was your only child, your natural heir, so it didn't seem urgent, he finished for me. That's what they're counting on. A wave of nausea swept through me. My own daughter, my only child, planning to have me declared incompetent, to seize control of my assets, all while smiling to my face and leaving their child in my care. What do we do? I asked, hating the tremor in my voice. Martin straightened his tie, a gesture I recognized from courtroom days. First, we document everything. Create a clear record of your current cognitive state and financial acumen. I'll arrange for evaluations with independent medical and psychological experts. And then we prepare a counter-strategy. If they want to play hardball, Eleanor, we need to be ready. His confidence steadied me. What about my will? Should we update it now? Absolutely. In fact, I brought the paperwork with me. He patted his briefcase. I had a feeling you might want to make some changes. After Martin left, armed with copies of the suspicious documents and a plan to return the following day with a doctor and financial examiner, I stood in my kitchen, feeling strangely energized. The initial shock and hurt were giving way to something more productive: determination. I picked up my phone and made 2 more calls, first to my bank to place holds on all my accounts, requiring in-person verification for any transactions over $1,000, and second, to a private investigator Martin had recommended. Sullivan Investigations, a brisk female voice answered. This is Eleanor Sullivan, I said. Martin Abernathy suggested I call. I need someone to track my daughter and son-in-law's activities in Las Vegas. What kind of activities are we talking about, Mrs. Sullivan? They told me they're there for business meetings. I have reason to believe they're actually consulting with an attorney about seizing control of my assets. I need confirmation, and I need it quickly. There was a pause, then. I can have someone on this within the hour. We have associates in Las Vegas. Would you like audio surveillance if possible? I hesitated only briefly. Yes, whatever is legal. I need to know exactly what they're planning. After providing Rebecca and Philip's information and hotel details, I hung up and looked around my kitchen. The same kitchen where I'd made Rebecca's school lunches, where I'd taught her to bake cookies, where we'd sat together after James's funeral, holding hands in shared grief. How had we come to this? The sound of the school bus pulling up outside snapped me from my thoughts. I quickly tucked away the scattered papers on the table and composed myself. Sophie would be home, and she mustn't suspect anything was wrong. As my granddaughter bounded through the door, backpack swinging, I greeted her with a genuine smile. Whatever was happening with Rebecca and Philip, Sophie was innocent. She was also, I was beginning to realize, my most important consideration in whatever came next. How was school, sweetheart? I asked, helping her with her jacket. Good. We're studying the solar system, and I got picked to be Jupiter in our class model because I knew all the moons. Her excitement was contagious, her earlier worry apparently forgotten. That's wonderful. Jupiter is the biggest planet, you know. Very important. That's what Ms. Winters said. Can we make cookies? I told Emily about your chocolate chip cookies, and she didn't believe they're the best in the world. We certainly can, I agreed, reaching for my apron. And maybe we can make a few extra for you to take to school tomorrow? As we measured flour and cracked eggs, I watched Sophie's concentrated expression, so reminiscent of Rebecca at that age. My granddaughter was the one pure thing in this mess, the one person whose motives I didn't question. Later, while the cookies cooled, Sophie worked on homework at the kitchen table while I pretended to read. In reality, I was formulating the next phase of my plan. Martin would handle the legal protections, the investigator would gather evidence, but there was something else I needed to do, something that would send a clear message when Rebecca and Philip returned. My phone pinged with a text from the investigator. Subjects located at the offices of Greenberg and Associates, known for elder law and asset management. Surveillance in progress. So it was true. They really were consulting with lawyers about taking control of my assets. Sophie's overheard conversation hadn't been a misunderstanding or childish misinterpretation. I looked at my granddaughter, innocently working on her math problems, then back at my phone. The final piece of my plan clicked into place. By Sunday evening, when Rebecca and Philip returned, they would find something very different from the compliant, naive woman they'd left behind. They'd find empty spaces where valuable items had been, missing documents, and changed locks. But most importantly, they'd find a grandmother who was done being underestimated and exploited, a grandmother who had finally woken up. I smiled to myself as I reached for a cookie. "Sophie, how would you like to help me with a special project tomorrow after school?" "What kind of project?" she asked, looking up from her homework. "A surprise," I said. "A big one." "Mrs. Sullivan, we have the recordings you requested." The investigator's voice came through my phone speaker as I stood in James's old study, a room I rarely entered since his death. Dawn light filtered through the blinds, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. I'd been awake since 4 a.m., my mind racing with plans and contingencies. "How bad is it?" I asked, running my fingers along the edge of James's mahogany desk. Diane Sullivan, no relation despite our shared surname, hesitated. "I think you should hear for yourself. I've sent the audio files to your email, password protected. The code is the one we discussed." I thanked her and ended the call, then settled into James's leather chair and opened my laptop. The familiar scent of his favorite lemon wood polish still clung to the furniture, a ghost of comfort as I prepared to face whatever betrayal had been captured. The first recording began with ambient restaurant noise, then Philip's unmistakable voice. "The lawyer says it's straightforward. We file for conservatorship, present evidence of her declining mental capacity, and request emergency temporary control of her assets pending the full hearing. And we'll definitely get it?" Rebecca, my daughter, the child I'd raised alone after James's early onset Alzheimer's diagnosis had consumed the last years of his life. "Greenberg says it's almost guaranteed. We've laid the groundwork with the financial documents. Once we get temporary control, we can start moving assets into the protected trust we've set up. By the time she figures out what's happening and tries to fight it, it'll be too late." Their voices continued, discussing me as if I were a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed, a resource to be exploited. They laughed about how I'd never notice certain transactions, how I was living in the past, how they deserved the money more because they had real expenses while I just rattled around that old house reading books. The recordings continued through multiple meetings, with the lawyer, with a financial advisor, even with a doctor they planned to have evaluate me. The level of calculation was breathtaking. They'd thought of everything, from fabricating evidence of confusion to isolating me from friends who might notice something was wrong. The final recording was just Rebecca and Philip, alone in their hotel room. "Once we get control, we should move her into assisted living right away," Philip was saying. "That house has to be worth at least $800K in today's market." "She'll fight that," Rebecca replied. "She's weirdly attached to that place. She won't have a choice. That's the whole point of conservatorship. We'll be making the decisions, not her." "What about Sophie? Mom's her favorite person. She'll be upset." Philip's voice hardened. "Kids adapt. We'll tell her grandma needs special care now. And hey, with the inheritance properly managed, we can finally get Sophie into that Swiss boarding school we looked at. Best education money can buy? I guess you're right. It's really for the best. Mom can't manage on her own much longer anyway, and this way we control the situation instead of waiting for a crisis." "Exactly. We're just being responsible, taking care of things before they become problems." The recording ended, leaving me in silence, save for the ticking of James's old desk clock. I sat motionless, tears tracking silently down my cheeks, not from sadness, but from a cold, clarifying rage I'd never experienced before. They were planning to institutionalize me, sell my home, send Sophie away to boarding school, all while convincing themselves they were being responsible. I wiped my face and reached for my phone, texting Martin. "I have the proof. Recordings of everything. They're planning conservatorship, asset transfers, assisted living, the works." His response came quickly. "Don't delete anything. I'm bringing our experts today as planned. We'll build an ironclad defense." The day unfolded according to plan. While Sophie was at school, Martin arrived with Dr. Eleanor Chen, a respected neurologist, and Franklin Moss, a forensic accountant. For 3 hours, they evaluated me. Cognitive tests, financial knowledge assessment, memory exercises, judgment scenarios. "You're scoring in the 95th percentile for your age group, Mrs. Sullivan," Dr. Chen finally said, reviewing her notes. "There's absolutely no indication of cognitive impairment or decision-making deficits. If anything," added Mr. Moss, "you're unusually sharp with financial matters. Your records are meticulous, your investment knowledge is sophisticated, and your decision-making is entirely sound." Martin looked satisfied. "We'll have official reports for the file by tomorrow. Now, about your will, have you decided what changes you want to make?" I had. The new will was brutal in its clarity. Rebecca and Philip would receive nothing. Not a penny, not a keepsake, not a stick of furniture. Instead, everything would go into a trust for Sophie, managed by a professional trustee with Martin's firm providing oversight until she turned 30. A separate educational trust would ensure her schooling was covered through graduate school if she chose that path. I would remain in control of my assets during my lifetime, with an independent panel of professionals to determine my capacity should questions ever arise, removing any possibility that Rebecca and Philip could gain control. "There's one more thing," I told Martin as he prepared the documents. "I want to change the locks on the house today, and I need a security system installed." "I can arrange that," he said, not questioning my sudden desire for security. He'd heard the recordings too, understood what we were dealing with. "And I've already started the process of securing your financial accounts. By end of day, Rebecca and Philip won't have access to anything, not even the accounts they think you don't know about." After the experts left, I had just enough time before Sophie's bus arrived to begin the next phase of my plan. I moved methodically through the house, removing valuable items from their usual places. James's antique watch collection, my grandmother's silver, the small but valuable art pieces we'd collected over the years. These treasures weren't being hidden out of fear of theft, but as part of a carefully choreographed scene I was creating. When Rebecca and Philip returned, they would find obvious gaps where valuable items had been, triggering their worst fears about what I might know or what actions I might have taken. The locksmith arrived just as Sophie's bus pulled up. I quickly explained to him that I needed to step out to meet my granddaughter, and he assured me he could continue working while I was briefly away. Sophie bounded off the bus, her face lighting up when she saw me waiting. "Grandma, guess what? I got an A on my Jupiter project." "That's wonderful, sweetheart." I hugged her close, inhaling the scent of school, pencil shavings, cafeteria food, and that indefinable energy of children. "I'm so proud of you." As we walked hand in hand toward the house, Sophie noticed the locksmith's van. "What's that man doing at our house?" "He's changing the locks," I said truthfully. "The old ones were getting sticky." "Oh." She accepted this explanation easily, then brightened. "Are we still doing our special project today?" "Absolutely." I squeezed her hand. "In fact, it's going to be even more special than I first thought." Inside, I settled Sophie with a snack while the locksmith finished his work. When he left, handing me sets of new keys, I sat beside my granddaughter at the kitchen table. "Sophie, how would you like to go on a treasure hunt with me?" Her eyes widened with excitement. "A real treasure hunt? With a map and everything?" "Sort of," I smiled. "We're going to gather some special things from around the house and take them on a little trip. It's a surprise for your mom and dad when they get home." "What kind of surprise?" she asked, instantly curious. I leaned in conspiratorially. "Well, that's the secret part, but I promise it's going to be something they'll never forget." As we began our treasure hunt, gathering items that would be noticed if missing, I felt a strange sense of peace. The path ahead would be difficult, confrontation, legal battles, family fractures, but for the first time since James died, I felt fully alive, fully in control. They had underestimated me for the last time. "Grandma, is this one of the treasures?" Sophie held up a crystal paperweight from James's desk, sunlight fracturing through its facets to cast tiny rainbows across her face. "It certainly is," I confirmed, holding open the velvet pouch I'd brought for such items. "Your grandfather received that when he made partner at his firm. He'd want it kept safe." We moved through the house like a peculiar archaeological expedition, Sophie hunting for treasures, while I directed her toward items that would be immediately noticed missing. James's first edition books from the living room shelves, the small Tiffany lamp from the entryway table, the antique chess set displayed in the den. I'd explained our treasure hunt as a surprise for her parents, which wasn't entirely untrue. Their surprise upon returning would indeed be memorable. "What about this?" Sophie stood on tiptoes, pointing to the curio cabinet where I kept my most valuable pieces of jewelry. "Excellent spotting," I praised her, unlocking the cabinet. "These were special gifts from your grandfather." I removed the blue velvet boxes containing James's more extravagant gifts. The diamond earrings from our 25th anniversary, the sapphire pendant he'd given me when Rebecca was born, the tennis bracelet from our last Christmas together before the Alzheimer's took too much of him. "They're so pretty," Sophie breathed, eyes wide as I opened each box to show her. "Like a princess's jewels. They're special memories," I corrected gently, tucking the boxes into my large handbag. and memories should be protected. We continued our expedition, Sophie growing increasingly enthusiastic as our treasure collection grew. She didn't question why we were gathering these items or where they would go. In her mind, we were simply having an adventure together, a special secret between grandmother and granddaughter. When we'd collected everything on my mental inventory, I glanced at my watch. Nearly 5 o'clock, just enough time for the next phase. "Sophie, how would you like to have dinner at Rossini's tonight?" Her eyes lit up. Rossini's was her favorite restaurant, a treat usually reserved for birthdays and special occasions. "Really? Can we have the chocolate lava cake?" "Absolutely," I assured her. "But first, we need to take our treasures somewhere safe. Do you think you can help me with that?" She nodded solemnly, clearly taking her role as treasure guardian very seriously. "Where are we taking them?" "To a special vault," I explained, using terms she'd understand from her adventure books. "A place where important things are kept protected." The vault was in reality a safety deposit box at my bank, one that Rebecca and Philip knew nothing about. I'd opened it years ago to store certain documents James had wanted kept separate from our home safe. This morning, I'd called ahead to arrange access after regular hours, leveraging my 50-year relationship with the bank's manager. Sophie was suitably impressed by the bank's security procedures, the verification of my identity, the dual keys needed to access the vault area, the hushed tones of the manager as he escorted us to a private room. To her, this was better than any pretend game of spies or explorers. This was real adventure with real treasure. "This is where we'll keep everything safe until the right time," I told her as we carefully arranged the items in the large safety deposit box. I'd already placed the most crucial documents there earlier. Copies of the recordings, the new will, photographs of the financial records showing discrepancies. "When will we come back for them?" Sophie asked, carefully placing her grandfather's paperweight alongside his watches. "When everything is settled," I said, smoothing her hair. "Don't worry, these treasures aren't going away forever. They're just waiting for the right moment to come home." As we finished and the box was secured, Sophie looked up at me with those clear eyes that saw too much. "Is this because of what I told you? About Mom and Dad's trip?" My heart skipped. I'd underestimated her understanding of the situation. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart?" She scuffed her shoe against the polished floor. "Because you've been different since I told you. Not sad exactly, but thinking a lot. And now we're hiding treasures." I knelt to her level, meeting those eyes so like James's. "Sophie, sometimes grown-ups need to protect the things that matter. That's all I'm doing, protecting what matters, including you, always you." She seemed to accept this, nodding with a solemnity beyond her years. "I'm glad you're not sad anymore, Grandma. You smile more now, even if it's a different kind of smile. Out of the mouths of babes." She was right. Something fundamental had shifted in me since that bedtime confession. The fog of grief and complacency that had enveloped me since James's death was burning away, replaced by a clarity of purpose I hadn't felt in years. "Let's go get that chocolate lava cake," I said, taking her hand. "I think we've earned it." Over dinner at Rossini's, Sophie chattered about school and friends, the conversation thankfully shifting to lighter topics. I listened attentively, memorizing her expressions, the way she talked with her hands like James always had, her infectious laugh when the waiter performed a small magic trick with her napkin. This child was what mattered. Not the money, not the house, not even the principle of the thing, though that certainly fueled my resolve. Sophie deserved better than parents who saw her as an accessory to their lifestyle, who planned to ship her off to boarding school while they enjoyed the fruits of their scheme. As promised, we ordered the chocolate lava cake for dessert, watching with appropriate awe as the warm chocolate center flowed out when Sophie broke the surface with her spoon. "Grandma," she said between blissful bites, "can we do more adventures together? Not just treasure hunts, but real adventures? What kind of adventures did you have in mind?" She considered this seriously, licking chocolate from her spoon. "Maybe we could go to the beach, or to the mountains. I've never seen real mountains." "I think that could be arranged," I said, an idea forming. "In fact, would you like to go on a special trip, just you and me, when school lets out for spring break?" "Really?" Her eyes widened. "Where would we go?" "That would be another surprise, but I promise it would be somewhere with mountains. Very tall ones." She practically vibrated with excitement. "Can we really? Would Mom and Dad let me?" "Let me worry about your mom and dad," I said, my tone light despite the weight behind the words. After all, what grandmothers and granddaughters do together is our special business, isn't it? Sophie nodded enthusiastically, already peppering me with questions about what we might see and do on our hypothetical mountain adventure. I answered each one, making mental notes for the trip that was rapidly becoming less hypothetical in my mind. By the time we returned home, night had fallen. The house looked different somehow, emptier, despite the fact that we'd only removed a small fraction of its contents. Perhaps it was simply that I was seeing it through new eyes, recognizing it not as the sanctuary I'd clung to, but as just a structure, one that held memories certainly, but not the essence of those memories. That essence was portable. It resided in the relationships, the moments, the connections that sustained us. James had known that, had tried to tell me in his final lucid months that I shouldn't anchor myself to things or places after he was gone. I hadn't been ready to hear it then. I was ready now. As I tucked Sophie into bed, she yawned widely, the day's excitement finally catching up with her. "Grandma, are Mom and Dad coming home tomorrow?" "Yes, sweetheart. Tomorrow evening. Will they like our surprise?" I smoothed her covers, buying myself a moment to frame my response. "It will certainly get their attention. But remember, this is our secret adventure for now. Let me be the one to explain it to them, okay?" She nodded, already drifting toward sleep. "Kay, love you, Grandma. I love you too, my sweet girl. More than you'll ever know." After she fell asleep, I moved through the house one final time, ensuring everything was in place for tomorrow's homecoming. The obvious gaps where valuable items had been, the new locks, the security system keypad now prominently installed by the front door. In the kitchen, I placed one final touch on the counter, a note, handwritten in my precise penmanship. "Welcome home. Things have changed. We need to talk. Mom." Simple, direct, and guaranteed to send Rebecca and Philip into a panic the moment they walked through the door. Sunday evening arrived with the golden glow of late afternoon sunlight streaming through the windows of my too-quiet house. Sophie and I had spent the day baking cookies, playing board games, and reading together, ordinary activities that felt extraordinarily precious now that I understood the full scope of Rebecca and Philip's plans. "When will they be here?" Sophie asked for the third time, peering out the front window. "Their flight lands at 6:15, I reminded her, checking the flight tracker app I'd installed. "Then they need to get their luggage and drive home. Probably around 7:30 or 8. Ow." Sophie flopped dramatically onto the sofa. "That's forever from now." "It'll go by quickly," I assured her, though privately I felt the same impatience, albeit for very different reasons. "Why don't we watch a movie while we wait?" We settled on one of her favorites, though I found myself unable to focus on the animated characters' adventures. My mind kept returning to the recordings I'd heard, to Rebecca and Philip's casual cruelty as they planned to dismantle my life and ship Sophie off to boarding school. My phone buzzed with a text from Martin. "Everything in place. Call immediately if needed. I can be there in 20 minutes. I texted back a quick acknowledgement, then checked that the security cameras Martin's team had installed were functioning properly. The discrete system would record everything that happened when Rebecca and Philip arrived, providing additional evidence should we need it, though I hoped it wouldn't come to that. At 7:43 p.m., headlights swept across the living room wall as a car pulled into the driveway. "They're here!" Sophie leapt up, rushing to the window. "Remember," I said quietly, "let me handle the explaining, okay?" She nodded solemnly, our conspiracy of two still intact. I heard the rattle of keys, then confused murmuring as Rebecca discovered her key no longer worked. The doorbell rang, followed by impatient knocking. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. "Mom? Why is there a new lock?" Rebecca stood on the porch, travel-weary but perfectly put together as always. Behind her, Philip was unloading luggage from their luxury SUV. "I had some security concerns," I replied evenly. "Come in. Sophie's been waiting for you." Rebecca's eyes narrowed slightly at my tone, but she brushed past me into the foyer where Sophie was waiting. "There's my girl. Did you have fun with Grandma?" "The best time ever." Sophie launched herself into her mother's arms. "We had so many adventures." "Adventures?" Rebecca echoed, glancing at me over Sophie's head. Before I could respond, Philip entered with their bags, immediately freezing as his gaze locked on the empty space where the Tiffany lamp had stood for decades. "Eleanor," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "Where's the lamp that was here?" "Somewhere safe," I replied, shutting the door firmly behind him. "Along with several other things." Rebecca set Sophie down, suddenly alert. What do you mean somewhere safe? What's going on? Sophie, sweetheart, I said gently. Why don't you go upstairs and organize your school things for tomorrow while your parents and I chat? Sophie glanced between us, sensing the tension, but obediently heading upstairs. Once we heard her bedroom door close, Rebecca rounded on me. Mom, what is going on? First new locks, now things missing? I think you know exactly what's going on, I interrupted, my voice soft but steel-edged. Las Vegas was illuminating, wasn't it? Greenberg and Associates comes highly recommended for elder exploitation cases, I hear. The blood drained from Rebecca's face. Philip, ever the quicker recovery artist, forced a laugh. I don't know what you're talking about. We were meeting investors for my new development project. Really? I raised an eyebrow. So you weren't discussing conservatorship, asset protection trusts, moving me into assisted living and selling my house? With each question, their expressions confirmed what I already knew. You weren't planning to send Sophie to that Swiss boarding school you've been researching? Rebecca grabbed the back of a chair for support. How could you possibly know? Does it matter? I asked simply. The point is, I do know. Everything. Philip's face hardened, his charm evaporating like morning dew. Whatever you think you know, you can't prove anything. We were exploring options, that's all, for your own protection. My protection, I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. How thoughtful of you to protect me from my own money, from my own home, from my own granddaughter. Rebecca found her voice, anger replacing shock. You're twisting everything. We're worried about you, living alone in this big house, managing so much money at your age. At my age, I echoed. I'm 68, Rebecca, not 98. I'm in perfect health, my mind is sharp, and I've been managing finances since before you were born. I moved to the kitchen, indicating they should follow. But you don't have to take my word for it. On the counter lay a stack of documents, the neurologist's report, the financial competency assessment, statements from my various accounts showing consistent, prudent management. As you can see, I've been quite busy while you were away, I said, watching as Philip flipped through the papers with growing alarm. I've also made some other changes you should be aware of. Rebecca's eyes darted around the kitchen, noticing the security system panel now installed by the back door. What kind of changes? My will, for one, I said calmly. You and Philip have been removed as beneficiaries. Completely. You can't do that. Philip's mask slipped entirely, raw greed flashing across his face. We're your family. Family doesn't conspire to declare me incompetent. Family doesn't plot to institutionalize me and sell my home. Family doesn't plan to ship Sophie off to boarding school while they enjoy my money. Rebecca flinched as if slapped. We never. Don't. My voice was quiet, but sharp enough to cut her protest short. Don't insult us both by lying when we both know the truth. I have recordings, Rebecca. Hours of recordings of you and Philip discussing your plans in extensive detail. Philip's face went from red to white. That's illegal. You can't record people without their knowledge. Nevada is a one-party consent state for recordings in public places, I informed him, having researched this thoroughly with Martin. The restaurant, the hotel lobby, the lawyer's office waiting room, all perfectly legal. Your hotel room might be more questionable, but I'm willing to take my chances in court. Are you? The threat hung in the air between us. I could see them calculating, reassessing, realizing just how thoroughly their plan had backfired. What do you want? Rebecca finally asked, her voice small. What do I want? I considered the question carefully. I want you to understand exactly what kind of consequences your actions have created. I want you to realize what you've lost through your own greed and dishonesty. I looked directly at my daughter, the child I'd raised, the woman who'd betrayed me so completely. Most of all, I want you to know that things between us will never be the same again. From upstairs came the sound of Sophie's bedroom door opening. All three of us immediately composed our expressions, the veneer of family normalcy sliding back into place with practiced ease. But beneath that veneer, everything had changed, and we all knew it. Sophie bounded down the stairs, oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred in her family's dynamic. Is the grown-up talk over? Can I come down now? Perfect timing, sweetheart, I said, forcing warmth into my voice despite the ice in the room. Your parents were just telling me about their trip. Rebecca managed a brittle smile. Yes, it was productive. We have a lot to think about. Did you bring me something? Sophie asked, looking expectantly at their luggage. It was their tradition. Small gifts from every business trip, tokens meant to ease the guilt of their frequent absences. Philip's expression froze. In their haste to execute their plan, they'd apparently forgotten this ritual. Actually, I interjected smoothly, I think your parents are too tired from traveling to do presents tonight. Why don't you tell them about our treasure hunt instead? Sophie launched into an excited account of our adventures, blissfully unaware of the tension crackling between the adults. Rebecca and Philip nodded mechanically at appropriate intervals, their minds clearly racing with damage control strategies. And Grandma says we might go on a real adventure during spring break, Sophie concluded. To see mountains, real ones. Rebecca's head snapped up. What, Mom? We haven't discussed any trips. It just came up yesterday, I replied mildly. Sophie mentioned she'd never seen mountains. I thought it might be educational. We'd need to check our calendars, Philip interjected quickly. Spring break is a busy time for us. I met his gaze steadily. I'm sure you can manage without her for a week. After all, you were considering sending her to boarding school in Switzerland. That would be months without seeing her, not just a week. Sophie's eyes widened. Boarding school? Like in Harry Potter? A flash of panic crossed Rebecca's face. No one's going to boarding school. Grandma misunderstood something we were discussing. Did I? I asked softly. Before the conversation could deteriorate further, I glanced at the clock. Goodness, it's getting late, and Sophie has school tomorrow. Why don't you help her get ready for bed while I make some tea? Then we can continue our discussion. Rebecca hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave me alone, but the prospect of removing Sophie from the increasingly tense atmosphere won out. Come on, sweetie, let's get you ready for bed. As they headed upstairs, Philip stepped closer, lowering his voice. This isn't over, Eleanor. Whatever you think you've accomplished here, I've accomplished exactly what I intended, I interrupted calmly. I've protected my assets, my autonomy, and most importantly, my granddaughter. Whether this is over depends entirely on your next moves. His jaw tightened. Are you threatening us? I'm stating facts. Now, I suggest you join your wife and daughter upstairs. Sophie will want to say goodnight to you both. After they disappeared upstairs, I leaned against the kitchen counter, allowing myself a moment of quiet triumph. Phase 1 had gone exactly as planned. The shock, the denial, the realization that I was several steps ahead of them. Now came the delicate part, establishing new boundaries while preserving what little relationship might be salvageable for Sophie's sake. By the time Rebecca and Philip returned downstairs, I had prepared tea and arranged 3 cups at the kitchen table. A deliberate choice. The kitchen was familiar, neutral territory, less formal than the living room with its now conspicuous empty spaces. Sophie's asleep, Rebecca said, sliding into a chair. She was exhausted. Big adventures will do that, I replied, pouring tea with steady hands. She's a wonderful child, perceptive, kind, honest. The implied comparison hung in the air between us. Mom, Rebecca began, her voice carefully modulated. I think there's been a serious misunderstanding. Whatever you think you heard, stop. I set my cup down with a decisive click. I didn't think I heard anything. I know exactly what you were planning. I have the evidence. Denying it only wastes everyone's time and insults my intelligence, something you've both done quite enough of already. Philip leaned forward, switching tactics. Look, Eleanor, maybe we got carried away exploring options. We were concerned about you, that's all. Living alone, managing such a large estate, an estate you were planning to control, I finished for him. Let's be absolutely clear. This was never about concern for my welfare. It was about getting your hands on money you didn't earn and couldn't legitimately access. Rebecca flushed. That's not fair. We've had expenses, responsibilities, which you chose, I pointed out. The oversized house, the luxury cars, the private schools and expensive vacations. No one forced that lifestyle on you. So what happens now? Philip asked bluntly. You've made your point. You've changed your will, installed security, hidden your valuables. What's your endgame here? My endgame is quite simple. I opened a folder I'd prepared earlier and placed several documents on the table. These are my terms going forward. They leaned forward, scanning the papers with growing disbelief. You can't be serious, Rebecca finally said. I've never been more serious in my life. I tapped the first document. As you can see, I've established a trust for Sophie's education and future needs. Neither of you can access it under any circumstances. It will be managed by an independent trustee until she turns 30. Philip's face darkened. You're cutting us out completely? From my estate, yes. From my life. I hesitated, the pain I'd been suppressing finally seeping through. That depends on what happens next. I indicated the second document. This outlines my conditions for any continued relationship. First, no more financial support. Not for emergencies, not for investments, not for anything. You're adults with good incomes. Live within your means. Rebecca's lips thinned to a white line. And the rest of these conditions? Regular scheduled time with Sophie, without interference or last-minute cancellations. No attempts to alienate her from me or restrict our relationship. And complete transparency going forward. One more attempt to manipulate, deceive, or undermine me. And I'll not only cut all contact, I'll ensure everyone in our social circle knows exactly what you tried to do. This is blackmail, Philip sputtered. No, I corrected him. This is consequence. You plotted to have me declared incompetent, institutionalized, and stripped of my autonomy. Consider yourselves lucky that my response is merely withdrawing financial support and establishing clear boundaries. Rebecca stared at me as if seeing a stranger. In many ways, she was. The compliant, accommodating mother who'd enabled her poor choices for decades had disappeared the moment Sophie whispered her warning. What about the things you took? She asked. Family heirlooms? Valuable pieces? They're safe, I assured her. And they'll remain that way until I'm confident they won't mysteriously disappear or be sold off by a suddenly appointed conservator. The reference to their thwarted plan hung in the air. Rebecca and Philip exchanged glances, a wordless communication I couldn't interpret. We need time to think about this, Philip finally said. Take all the time you need, I replied, gathering the documents and returning them to the folder. But understand that these terms aren't negotiable. You've lost the right to negotiate. As they retreated to digest this new reality, I remained at the kitchen table, sipping my cooling tea. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, as if a long festering wound had finally been lanced. Whatever came next wouldn't be easy. Relationships built on exploitation rarely transition smoothly to mutual respect, but I'd taken the first critical step. I'd reclaimed my power and established boundaries that should have been in place years ago. For Sophie's sake, I hoped Rebecca and Philip would eventually accept the new paradigm. For my own sake, I was prepared if they didn't. The next 3 days unfolded in a strange, suspended animation. Rebecca and Philip moved through the house like ghosts, careful to maintain appearances in front of Sophie while barely acknowledging my presence when she wasn't looking. They'd retreated to strategize, I knew, weighing their limited options against my ironclad evidence. On Wednesday evening, as Sophie worked on homework at the kitchen table, Philip finally approached me in the garden where I was deadheading roses. We've discussed your terms, he said without preamble. And? I continued my pruning, refusing to show eagerness for their decision. We'll agree. With some modifications. I straightened, fixing him with a level gaze. There are no modifications, Philip. This isn't a negotiation. His jaw tightened. Be reasonable, Eleanor. You can't just cut us off completely after years of financial support. We have commitments, obligations based on the understanding that— That what? I interrupted. That my money would always be available to you? That was never an understanding, just an assumption on your part. We've built our lives around certain expectations, he persisted. Expectations of taking control of my assets against my will? I shook my head. Those expectations were never reasonable or justified. Philip glanced toward the house, ensuring Sophie couldn't hear us. Look, you've made your point. We overstepped, but there must be some middle ground. The middle ground is that I'm not pressing charges for attempted elder abuse and financial exploitation, I replied calmly. The middle ground is that I'm willing to maintain a relationship with you both for Sophie's sake, despite what you plan to do to me. His expression hardened. Rebecca was right. You've changed. Yes, I agreed, returning to my roses. I have. I've finally recognized my own worth and set appropriate boundaries. If that seems like a change to you, that's quite telling, isn't it? Later that night, after Sophie had gone to bed, Rebecca came to my study where I was reading. Mom, she began, her voice soft in a way it hadn't been in years. Can we talk? Really talk? I set aside my book. I'm listening. She sat across from me, looking suddenly young, and uncertain. I know what we did was wrong. The lawyer, the plans, it got out of hand. We never meant to hurt you. Yet hurting me was an inevitable consequence of your actions, I pointed out. How could taking away my autonomy, selling my home, and placing me in a facility against my will result in anything but hurt? Rebecca flinched. We convinced ourselves it was for your own good, that you needed protection from getting older. Protection from aging? Or protection from controlling my own money? I asked, keeping my voice gentle despite the hardness of the question. Tears welled in her eyes. Both? I don't know anymore. It all made sense when Philip explained it. But now that you've been caught, the justifications seem flimsy. I finished for her. She nodded miserably. I don't expect you to forgive us. But for Sophie's sake, can we try to move forward somehow? For the first time since this began, I felt a flicker of hope that my daughter might genuinely understand the magnitude of her betrayal. Moving forward requires acknowledgement of what happened, Rebecca, not excuses or minimization. I know, she whispered, and I am sorry, truly. We got lost somewhere, in ambition, in appearances, in always wanting more than we had. I studied her face, searching for sincerity beneath the practiced contrition. Rebecca had always been skilled at saying what others wanted to hear, but there was something different in her expression now. A crack in the perfect facade, a glimpse of genuine regret. I can't trust you yet, I said finally. That will take time and consistent behavior, but I'm willing to work toward a new kind of relationship, if you are. One based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. She nodded, wiping away a tear. And the financial aspects of your terms? Are non-negotiable, I confirmed. You and Philip need to live within your actual means, not the inflated lifestyle you've maintained through my subsidies. We'll have to make significant changes, she admitted. The mortgage, Sophie's school tuition, the club memberships. Yes, you will, I agreed. But perhaps those changes might lead to more meaningful priorities. More time with Sophie instead of working constantly to maintain appearances. More authentic relationships not based on wealth or status. Rebecca looked skeptical but nodded again. We'll try. It won't be easy, but we'll try. After she left, I remained in my study, turning our conversation over in my mind. Was her contrition genuine or simply another strategy to protect her interests? Only time would tell. For now, I had to proceed with cautious optimism for Sophie's sake. The following morning, Rebecca and Philip announced they were returning to their own home. We've imposed on you long enough, Rebecca explained as they packed their bags, and we have adjustments to make, financial planning to do. I nodded, understanding the subtext. They needed to regroup, reassess their budget without my financial support, and determine how to maintain some semblance of their lifestyle with just their own incomes. Sophie was disappointed. Can't we stay longer? Grandma and I were going to start reading the new mystery series. You'll still see Grandma regularly, Rebecca assured her, with a meaningful glance in my direction. In fact, more regularly than before. We're working out a schedule. Like for your piano lessons, Philip added. Regular, on the calendar every week. Sophie brightened. Really? Not just when you remember or aren't busy? The innocent question landed like a slap, highlighting how often they'd canceled her time with me for their own convenience. Rebecca flushed, while Philip suddenly became very interested in his suitcase zipper. Really? Rebecca confirmed. Grandma's going to be a bigger part of our routine from now on. As they loaded their car, I pulled Rebecca aside for one final word. The spring break trip with Sophie. I meant what I said. I'd like to take her to see the mountains. Where exactly? She asked, wariness creeping back into her tone. Colorado. The Rockies. I've already looked into appropriate accommodations and activities for her age. Rebecca hesitated, old control patterns visibly wrestling with new realities. I suppose that would be all right, as long as we have details, emergency contacts, that sort of thing. Of course, I agreed easily. I'll send you a complete itinerary once it's finalized. What I didn't mention was that the trip represented more than just a grandmother-granddaughter vacation. It was a test of their willingness to honor our new arrangement, of their respect for my relationship with Sophie, of their acceptance that control had shifted. After they drove away, the house felt suddenly empty and quiet. For a moment, I missed Sophie's energetic presence acutely. But there was also relief, space to breathe, to process, to plan my next steps without performing normalcy for my granddaughter's sake. I made myself a cup of tea and carried it to the garden, sitting on the bench James had built decades ago. The roses needed more attention, I noted absently. Just like relationships, they required regular care, occasional pruning, and sometimes, when disease threatened the entire plant, more dramatic intervention. The metaphor brought a small smile to my face. I had performed some rather significant pruning on my family tree this week. Now it remained to be seen what new growth might emerge from the cuts. My phone buzzed with a text from Martin. "How did it go?" "They've agreed to the terms," I replied. "For now, at least." "Stay vigilant," came his immediate response. "People like that rarely change overnight." He was right, of course. This wasn't truly resolved, just shifted to a new phase. But for the first time in years, I felt in control of my own life, my own decisions, my own future. That alone was worth everything. 2 weeks passed, bringing cautious adjustment to our new family dynamic. True to their word, or perhaps mindful of the consequences of breaking it, Rebecca and Philip established a regular schedule for Sophie to spend time with me. Wednesday afternoons after school and every other weekend, Sophie would arrive with her backpack and bright smile, eager for our time together. The financial separation proved more challenging for them. Their first mortgage payment without my assistance prompted a tense phone call from Rebecca. "Mom, I know we agreed to the terms, but could you possibly, just this once, help with the payment? The property taxes came due at the same time, and we're a bit stretched." "No, Rebecca," I said gently but firmly. "Your finances are your responsibility now. You might need to consider downsizing if the house is beyond your means." Downsizing. Her horror at the suggestion was palpable even through the phone. "But this neighborhood, Sophie's school district, there are excellent public schools," I pointed out, "and smaller homes in good neighborhoods. These are the kinds of decisions most families make based on their actual incomes." After a moment of stunned silence, she'd mumbled something about looking into options and ended the call. Later that week, I noticed a for sale sign had appeared in front of their house. Meanwhile, I focused on rebuilding my own life, not just around Sophie, but for myself. I joined a book club at the local library, reconnected with old friends I'd neglected during James's illness, and even began taking a watercolor class on Tuesday mornings. Small steps toward the woman I might have been all along, had I not subsumed myself in caretaking roles. Martin checked in regularly, ensuring the legal protections we'd put in place remained solid. The recordings and documents stayed securely in my safety deposit box, insurance against any backsliding on Rebecca and Philip's part. "Have you considered returning the items you removed from the house?" he asked during one of our conversations. "Now that the immediate threat has passed?" "Not yet," I replied. "I'm still watching and waiting. Trust takes longer to rebuild than it does to break." He'd nodded approvingly. "Wise approach. Keep the leverage until you're absolutely certain." On a sunny Saturday in mid-March, I was teaching Sophie how to make James's famous blueberry pancakes when my phone rang with Rebecca's ringtone. "Good morning," I answered, tucking the phone between my ear and shoulder as I helped Sophie flip a perfectly golden pancake. "Mom, we need to talk." Rebecca's voice held an unfamiliar note, not the practiced charm she usually employed when asking for something, nor the tight control when things weren't going her way. She sounded defeated. "Is everything all right?" I asked, instantly alert. "Not really. The house sale fell through. The buyers couldn't secure financing." She paused. "And we've been downsizing in other ways. Philip's car went back to the dealership yesterday. We canceled the country club membership." "I see," I said neutrally, moving away from Sophie, who was happily decorating her pancakes with blueberry faces. "These are difficult adjustments, but necessary ones. I know that now." Another pause. "The thing is, we found a smaller house we can actually afford. It's in a different school district, but like you said, the public schools are good. The problem is the down payment. We've liquidated what we can, but we're still short." I tensed, waiting for the inevitable request for money that would test our new boundaries. "I was wondering," she continued, "if you might consider letting us sell some of the family's silver? The pieces that would have come to me eventually anyway? It would make the difference for the down payment, and it seems better than taking on more debt." The request took me by surprise, not for money directly, but for permission to sell items she considered her inheritance, items currently secured in my safety deposit box. "That's an interesting proposal," I said carefully. "Let me think about it and get back to you." After ending the call, I returned to the kitchen where Sophie was proudly displaying her blueberry pancake art. "Look, Grandma, this one has a smile just like yours." "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I praised her, pushing aside thoughts of Rebecca's request to focus on the moment. Later, while Sophie was absorbed in a movie, I called Martin for advice. "It's a test," he said immediately. "They're seeing if you'll bend on the financial aspects of your agreement." "Perhaps," I acknowledged, "but it's also the first time Rebecca has proposed a solution that doesn't involve me simply writing a check. There's a recognition there that these items have value, that choices have consequences." "What are you thinking of doing?" he asked. "I'm not sure yet," I admitted. "Part of me wants to maintain the hard line we established. Another part sees this as potentially a step toward Rebecca taking responsibility." After further discussion, I arrived at a decision that felt right, firm but not punitive, maintaining boundaries while acknowledging effort. When I picked Sophie up for our Wednesday afternoon the following week, I asked Rebecca if we could speak privately for a few minutes. "I've considered your request about the silver," I began once Sophie was occupied with her tablet in the next room. Rebecca nodded, tension visible in the set of her shoulders. "And? I won't release the silver for you to sell," I said, watching her face fall. "But I have an alternative proposal." I outlined my solution. I would provide a one-time contribution to their down payment, not as a gift, but as an advance against any future inheritance Rebecca might receive. The amount would be documented, with interest, to be deducted from whatever portion of my estate might eventually go to her. Additionally, any such arrangement would be contingent on continued adherence to our agreement regarding Sophie and appropriate boundaries. "You're lending us the money?" she clarified, confusion evident in her expression. "No," I corrected gently. "I'm advancing you a portion of what might someday be yours, with the understanding that it reduces that future amount. There's no repayment schedule, no debt, just a documented reduction in any potential inheritance." Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, processing this unexpected approach. "That's fair," she finally said. "More than fair, actually." "I think so too," I agreed. "It acknowledges that you're making genuine efforts to adjust your lifestyle while maintaining the principle that my assets remain under my control." "And if we slip back into old patterns?" she asked, surprising me with her perceptiveness. "Then any future considerations would be off the table," I said simply. "This is a one-time accommodation in recognition of your efforts so far." As we finalized the details, I observed a subtle shift in Rebecca's demeanor. A new respect in her eyes, perhaps even a grudging admiration for how I'd navigated this challenge. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt we might eventually establish a healthier relationship, not just for Sophie's sake, but for our own. Later that afternoon, as Sophie and I walked through the park collecting interesting leaves for her science project, she looked up at me with those perceptive eyes. "Mom and Dad seem different lately, quieter, and Dad doesn't talk on his phone during dinner anymore. Sometimes adults have to make changes in their lives," I explained carefully, "just like you had to adjust when you moved from kindergarten to first grade." She considered this, then nodded. "They argue about money a lot, but not as loud as before. Financial adjustments can be challenging," I acknowledged, steering the conversation toward lighter topics. "How about we look for some of those red maple leaves for your project?" As Sophie raced ahead, searching for the perfect specimens, I reflected on her observation. Rebecca and Philip were struggling, yes, but perhaps in that struggle they might discover what truly mattered, that relationships and integrity ultimately brought more satisfaction than possessions or appearances. It was a lesson that had taken me far too long to learn myself. "Are those real mountains, Grandma?" Sophie pressed her face against the airplane window, eyes wide with wonder as the Rockies came into view. Majestic peaks still snow-capped in early April. "Those are real mountains," I confirmed, enjoying her excitement, "and tomorrow we'll be right up there among them." Spring break had arrived, and with it, our long-anticipated mountain adventure. To my surprise, Rebecca and Philip had honored our agreement without resistance, helping Sophie pack and delivering her to the airport with only the normal parental reminders about brushing teeth and wearing sunscreen. "Daddy seemed sad when we left," Sophie observed, finally turning away from the window. "He kept hugging me extra long." "He'll miss you," I said, choosing my words carefully. Parents always miss their children when they're apart, even when they know they're having wonderful experiences. "Do you think he and Mom will be okay in the smaller house?" she asked, the question catching me off guard. Mom keeps saying it's cozy, but I heard her telling her friend it's half the size of our old one. Children absorb so much more than we give them credit for. They'll adjust, sweetheart. Sometimes changes that seem difficult at first turn out to be exactly what we needed. Sophie nodded solemnly. Like when I had to switch dance classes and I was really sad, but then I made better friends in the new class. Exactly like that, I agreed, marveling at her resilience and insight. Our accommodations in Aspen were perfect. A comfortable 2-bedroom condo with stunning mountain views, walking distance to both the village and the gondola that would take us up the mountain. I'd researched extensively to find activities appropriate for Sophie's age and interest level, balancing outdoor adventures with cultural experiences. Our first full day began with a guided nature hike specifically designed for families. Our guide, a bearded young man named Travis, who clearly adored children, taught Sophie to identify animal tracks in the lingering patches of spring snow and explained how the aspens for which the town was named would soon be budding with new growth. Those trees are actually all one organism, he explained, pointing to a grove of slender white trunks. They're connected underground through their root system. What looks like many separate trees is actually one living thing. Like a family? Sophie asked, her brow furrowed in concentration. Travis grinned. That's a beautiful way to think about it, yes. Connected, even when they appear separate. I caught his eye over Sophie's head, offering a silent thank you for the perfect metaphor. Despite the fractures in our family, the connections remained, complex, sometimes painful, but undeniably present. The days unfolded in a pleasant rhythm of exploration and rest. We rode horses along mountain trails, visited a working ranch where Sophie helped feed baby lambs, attended a children's workshop at the local art center, and spent one magical evening stargazing with an astronomer who helped us identify constellations in the impossibly clear mountain sky. Through it all, Sophie blossomed with confidence and joy, her natural curiosity finding fertile ground in these new experiences. I took dozens of photos, documenting not just the activities, but the small moments between. Sophie's expression of wonder when a hummingbird hovered near our lunch table, her tongue stuck out in concentration as she painted a mountain landscape, her peaceful face as she dozed against my shoulder during a shuttle ride back to our condo. We should call Mom and Dad, she suggested on our third evening as we relaxed after dinner. Show them the mountains. I dialed Rebecca's number on my tablet, enabling video, so they could see both of us. There's my mountain explorer, Rebecca answered immediately, her face filling the screen. Dad, come quick. Sophie's calling. Philip appeared beside her, both of them smiling widely at the sight of their daughter. Hey, kiddo, how's the adventure going? Sophie launched into an enthusiastic recounting of our activities, her words tumbling over each other in her excitement to share everything at once. I watched Rebecca and Philip's faces as they listened, noting their genuine interest and the occasional glance in my direction, gauging, perhaps, how I was handling the solo caretaking duties they'd always insisted were too much for me. It sounds amazing, sweetheart, Rebecca said when Sophie finally paused for breath. Grandma's giving you such special experiences. The best part is, we're doing it together, Sophie declared. Grandma never says she's too busy or has to check her emails first. She's always right there doing everything with me. An uncomfortable silence followed this innocent observation. Rebecca and Philip exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. Well, that's wonderful, Philip finally said. We're so glad you're having fun. After a few more minutes of conversation and promises to call again before returning home, we ended the call. Sophie skipped off to take her bath, leaving me contemplating her unintentional commentary on her parents' usual attention patterns. My phone pinged with a text from Rebecca. She looked so happy. Thank you for giving her this experience. The simple acknowledgement, free from defensiveness or hidden agendas, felt like a small breakthrough. I texted back, she's a joy to be with. You've raised a remarkable daughter. On our final evening, we took the gondola up the mountain for dinner at a restaurant with panoramic views of the surrounding peaks. Sophie, dressed in her fancy clothes for the occasion, gazed out at the sun setting behind the mountains, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. Grandma, she said suddenly, turning from the window, this has been the best trip ever. Can we do this again sometime? Maybe in the summer when the flowers are blooming? I'd like that very much, I replied, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. Perhaps we could make it a tradition, a special grandmother-granddaughter adventure each year. Her face lit up. Really? Just us? Just us, I confirmed. Though we'll need to coordinate with your parents, of course. She nodded, then hesitated. Grandma, can I ask you something important? You can ask me anything, sweetheart. Are you and Mom fighting? Like, really fighting, not just normal grown-up disagreements? My heart sank. Despite our efforts to shield her, Sophie had sensed the fundamental shift in family dynamics. Your mom and I had some serious disagreements, I said carefully, about grown-up things like money and decision-making, but we're working through them. Because of the treasure hunt? She asked, connecting dots with her remarkable perceptiveness. Partly, I acknowledged. Sometimes adults need to make changes in how they relate to each other. It can be uncomfortable at first, but eventually, it leads to healthier relationships. She considered this, her small face serious in the golden light. Like when Lily and I had that big fight in second grade, and afterward we made rules about sharing and not bossing each other around, and now we're better friends? I smiled at her perfect child's analogy. Very much like that, yes. Good, she said with the simple certainty of childhood. Because I need both of you. You're both my special people. As we rode the gondola back down the mountain under a canopy of stars, Sophie's head resting against my shoulder, I reflected on her words. Beyond the legal maneuvers, the financial consequences, the painful revelations, there remained this essential truth. We were connected, like those aspen trees with their shared root system. The nature of those connections was changing, boundaries being re-established, but the underlying bond remained. For Sophie's sake, and perhaps, in a different way, for our own, we would find a new equilibrium, a healthier way of being family. The mountains around us, ancient and enduring, seemed to whisper that time had a way of smoothing even the sharpest edges, given enough patience and perspective. The morning of our return from Colorado dawned clear and bright, the mountains gleaming like sentinels against the azure sky as our taxi wound through aspen streets toward the airport. Sophie sat uncharacteristically quiet beside me, her usual chatter replaced by contemplative silence as she watched the majestic landscape recede. "Penny for your thoughts," I said, gently nudging her shoulder. She turned from the window, her eyes reflecting the mountain light. "I was just thinking about how everything feels different now." "Different how, sweetheart?" She considered this with that serious expression I'd grown to cherish, brows slightly furrowed, lower lip caught between her teeth. "Like, before, our house was always so busy and loud. Mom was always on the phone with her friends. Dad was always working or talking about money. But now, even though we have a smaller house and Dad says we have to be budget conscious, they seem more present." How profound children's observations could be. "And how do you feel about those changes?" "I like it," she decided, nodding with conviction. "Dad played board games with me 3 times last week, and he didn't check his phone once, and Mom helped with my science project instead of just signing the permission slip." She leaned against my arm, her small hand finding mine. "And I get to see you more. Regular, on the calendar, like a real plan." "That sounds like a very good change then," I remarked, squeezing her fingers. "It is." She looked up at me, sudden worry clouding her expression. "But what if it doesn't stay this way? What if they go back to being too busy again?" I met her gaze steadily. "I won't let that happen, Sophie. Some things have changed in our family that can't be undone. And these changes, the good ones, I'll make sure they stay." My quiet promise seemed to satisfy her. She nestled against me as we continued our journey, the mountains watching over us like ancient guardians of secrets and transformations. Rebecca and Philip were waiting at the arrival gate, both somehow looking years younger despite the challenges of their recent downsizing. Rebecca's designer clothes had been replaced by simple jeans and a sweater, her previously perfect manicure now charmingly practical. Philip stood without his customary stance of importance, his shoulders relaxed, his smile genuine as he spotted his daughter. "There's our mountain explorer," Rebecca called, kneeling to embrace Sophie as she ran ahead. "We've missed you so much." "I have 1,000,000 things to tell you," Sophie exclaimed breathlessly. "We saw real bears from super far away with binoculars, and I learned to identify 5 different evergreen trees, and we went stargazing with a real astronomer who showed us how to find planets." As Philip collected Sophie's suitcase, he met my eyes over her animated gestures. "Thank you," he said simply, the words carrying unexpected weight. She looks transformed. Fresh air and new experiences, I replied. Good for the soul at any age. Their new home revealed the extent of their downsizing. A modest but charming craftsman house on a street lined with mature maple trees. No pretentious pillars or marble foyer, just a welcoming porch with a swing and flower boxes awaiting spring planting. Would you like to come in for lunch? Rebecca asked as Philip unloaded Sophie's luggage. Nothing fancy, just sandwiches and soup, but we'd love to show you the place. The invitation held none of the calculation that had colored our interactions for years. I'd like that very much, I accepted. Inside, the house was less than half the size of their former showplace, but infinitely more inviting. Family photographs dominated the walls instead of expensive but impersonal art. Sophie's drawings and school projects were prominently displayed rather than hidden away in a designated child-appropriate area. We're still figuring it all out, Rebecca explained as she showed me around. Most of our furniture was too large and ornate for the spaces here, so we sold almost everything. But honestly, it's starting to feel more like home than the other house ever did. There's a warmth here, I observed truthfully. A sense of who you really are as a family. Something flickered across Rebecca's face, recognition of a truth she was just beginning to acknowledge. We spent so many years focused on appearances, she admitted quietly, while Philip helped Sophie organize her souvenirs upstairs. The right address, the right schools, the right social connections. Somewhere along the way, we completely lost track of what actually made us happy. It's an easy trap, I offered, my tone softening, especially when everyone around you seems to be chasing the same things. The surprising thing is, she continued, arranging simple ceramic plates on the kitchen island. I don't miss any of it as much as I thought I would. The country club was always more stressful than enjoyable. Constant pressure to wear the right things, say the right things, know the right people. Now we take Sophie to the community pool on Saturdays, and she laughs more there than she ever did at the club. As we prepared lunch together in their modest kitchen, I ventured carefully. And Philip? How is he adjusting? A genuine smile touched her lips, better than either of us expected. He's reconnected with a college friend who runs a local real estate office. Smaller properties, more modest commissions, but steady work with normal hours. He's home for dinner every night now, not constantly networking or chasing the next big deal. And you? I asked gently. Rebecca paused, knife hovering over a tomato. I'm finding my way back to myself, I think. I've started volunteering at Sophie's school library twice a week. And I'm training to teach yoga, if you can believe it. She laughed softly, the sound unguarded in a way I hadn't heard since she was young. Sometimes I don't recognize myself anymore, but in a good way. Sometimes we don't truly find ourselves until we're forced to look with fresh eyes, I observed. After lunch, while Sophie unpacked upstairs, Rebecca and Philip exchanged a meaningful glance before Rebecca spoke. Mom, we've been doing a lot of thinking and talking these past weeks. About what happened, about the choices we made, about where we go from here. I waited, neither encouraging nor discouraging whatever might come next. We were wrong, Philip stated plainly, the directness surprising me. Not just about the legal schemes, which were obviously wrong, but about everything. How we viewed family, how we treated you, what we thought mattered in life. Rebecca nodded, reaching for his hand. The downsizing, the budget adjustments, they've been challenging, yes, but also incredibly clarifying. We've had to distinguish between what we truly need and what we merely wanted because it impressed other people. We're not asking for financial help, Philip added quickly. That's not what this is about. We're managing within our means now, and frankly, it's been good for us to face reality. What we are asking for, Rebecca continued, her voice softening, is a chance to rebuild. Not the old relationship, which was built on unhealthy patterns, but something new, something better. I studied their faces, searching for the manipulation I'd grown accustomed to seeing. Instead, I found something that looked remarkably like sincerity, imperfect and tentative, but genuine. I'd like that, I said finally. For Sophie's sake, of course, but also for our own. As I prepared to leave later that afternoon, Sophie threw her arms around me in a fierce hug. Thank you for the mountains, Grandma. It was the best trip ever. We'll go again, I promised, returning her embrace. Maybe when the wildflowers are blooming in summer. Rebecca walked me to my car, lingering as I placed my bag inside. Mom, she said hesitantly, the things you took, The treasures you and Sophie collected, are they safe? I looked at my daughter, truly looked at her, and saw not the calculating woman who had plotted against me, but glimpses of the child she had once been, the little girl who had treasured family stories, who had sat beside me as I explained the history behind each heirloom. They're safe, I assured her, and one day, when the time is right, they'll come home again. She nodded, understanding the unspoken condition. Trust, once shattered, could be rebuilt, but slowly, deliberately, with clear evidence of changed hearts. As I drove away, I glanced in my rearview mirror to see Rebecca and Sophie standing on the porch of their modest new home, waving until I turned the corner. Something fundamental had shifted, not just in them, but in me as well. The grandmother who had left for the mountains was not the same woman who returned. She was stronger, clearer in her boundaries, more confident in her worth. She had rediscovered parts of herself long buried under caretaking roles and family obligations. The path ahead wouldn't be perfect. Old patterns had a way of reasserting themselves in moments of stress. But we had taken the first steps towards something healthier, a relationship based on respect rather than exploitation, on genuine connection rather than financial dependence. And that, I reflected as I drove toward my own home, was an inheritance worth more than any fortune. Did this story resonate with you? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took advantage of your generosity? Comment below and share your experience. And if you enjoyed this journey of empowerment and family transformation, be sure to subscribe to my channel for more stories that will touch your heart and perhaps even inspire changes in your own life. Remember to like and share with someone who might need to hear this message today. Your support helps this channel grow. For more content about family dynamics, setting healthy boundaries, and finding your strength later in life, click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Until next time, remember, it's never too late to reclaim your power and rewrite your story.